If you went up to my attic right now, past the Christmas decorations and the old winter coats, you would find a blue shoebox tucked behind the chimney. It's taped shut. On the top, in my handwriting from 50 years ago, it just says receipts. But there are no receipts in that box. There is a dried corsage from a high school prom. There is a single tiny knit bootie, white wool, that has yellowed with time. And there is a hospital bracelet with a date on it, November 14, 1962. For 40 years, I didn't tell a soul what was in that box. Not my husband, not the children I raised later in life. It was a ghost that lived in my ceiling. You see, looking at me now, you probably see a grandmother. You see a woman who bakes cookies and volunteers at the library. You see someone safe. But in 1962, I was considered a danger to society. I was considered fallen. I was 17 years old, I was unmarried, and I was pregnant. And in the America of 1962, that was a problem that had to be erased. This is the story of the day I signed a piece of paper that broke my heart, and why for decades I told the world I was just visiting an aunt in the country. To understand my story, you have to understand the world I lived in. It is very hard for young people today to truly grasp what the suburbs of America were like in the early 60s. On the surface, it was perfect. Manicured lawns, Sunday church, pot roast dinners. We didn't talk about feelings. We talked about appearances. There was a script, and you had to stick to it. You graduated high school, you got married, then you had a baby. In that order. Any deviation wasn't just a mistake. It was a moral catastrophe. I was a good girl. I was on the honor roll. I sang in the choir. My boyfriend, Tommy, was the captain of the baseball team. We were the it couple. We were in love in that terrifying, all-consuming way you are when you're 17. We made a mistake. Just one. When I missed my cycle, I didn't panic immediately. I prayed. I bargained with God. I promised I'd go to church every day if it was just a scare. But then the morning sickness started. I remember the day I told my mother. It was a Tuesday. My father was at work. She was ironing in the kitchen. I stood in the doorway, twisting my skirt in my hands, and I just said, "Mom, I'm in trouble." She stopped ironing. She didn't look at me. She stared at the wall for a long time. The silence was so loud, I could hear the refrigerator humming. When she finally looked at me, she didn't scream. She didn't cry. She looked terrified. She whispered, "Does anyone know?" I shook my head. "Just Tommy." She walked over to the phone, took it off the hook, and closed the curtains. She said, "No one can know." Not the neighbors, not the church, not your cousins. No one. It wasn't about my health. It wasn't about the baby. It was about the shame. If people found out, my father could use his standing in the community. My sister wouldn't get asked to dances. I would be a pariah. In 1962, there was no co-parenting. There was no single mom by choice. There was only marriage, or there was disappearance. And Tommy, he was 18, heading to college on a scholarship. His parents made it very clear that a shotgun wedding was not going to ruin his future. So, a plan was made. A uniquely American solution for a problem that didn't exist. 2 weeks later, my parents told the neighbors I was going to stay with a sick aunt in Oklahoma to help her recover from surgery. It was a lie so common in those days that people probably knew, but they were polite enough not to ask. I packed a suitcase. I didn't go to Oklahoma. I went to a facility 3 towns over. It was called a home for unwed mothers. These places were everywhere in America back then, hidden in plain sight. They were large, quiet houses run by charities or churches. When I walked in, the matron, a stern woman in a gray suit, took my suitcase. She looked at me over her glasses and said, "While you are here, you will be known as Margaret. We do not use last names. It is better for everyone if you remain anonymous." Margaret was my middle name. I lost my identity the moment I crossed the threshold. There were 20 of us living there, girls from all over. Some were 14, some were 22. We were all in different stages of pregnancy, wearing oversized smocks to hide our bodies. We were ghosts. We were girls who had been erased from our own lives. We had chores. We scrubbed floors. We peeled potatoes. We knitted. But we never talked about the babies. It was an unspoken rule. You didn't ask, "What are you naming him?" or "Are you excited?" Because none of us were keeping them. The social workers were relentless. That is the part that haunts me the most. Once a week, I had to sit in a small, stuffy office with a woman named Mrs. Evans. She wasn't mean exactly. She was efficient. She would say things like, "Margaret, if you truly love this child, you will give him what he deserves. He deserves a mother and a father. He deserves a backyard and a college fund. Can you give him that?" I was 17. I had $12 to my name. I would cry and say, "But I love him." And she would say, "Love isn't enough. If you keep him, you are being selfish. You will condemn him to a life of poverty and ridicule. Don't you want him to be happy?" They brainwashed us. Day after day, they drilled it into our heads that we were unfit simply because we didn't have a wedding ring. By the time I was 8 months pregnant, I truly believed that keeping my own child would be an act of cruelty. November 14th. I went into labor in the middle of the night. I was terrified. I had never been in a hospital before. I wanted my mother, but she wasn't there. No family was allowed. It was just me and the nurses. The pain was overwhelming, but the loneliness was worse. I remembered grabbing a nurse's hand, begging her to stay with me, and she just pulled her hand away and said, "You should have thought about this before you got into trouble." That was the mercy I received. When the moment finally came, when my son was born, the room went silent. I heard him cry. It was a strong, loud cry. I tried to sit up. I said, "Is it a boy? Can I see him?" The doctor didn't answer. He turned his back to me. The nurse took the baby and immediately walked out of the room. I shouted, "Please, just let me see him." But the door swung shut. This was standard practice. It was called the clean break. They believed that if we didn't see the baby, we wouldn't bond, and it would be easier to sign the papers. They thought they were being kind. They were wrong. I lay there in that sterile white room, empty and bleeding, listening to the carts wheeling down the hallway, straining my ears to hear him. I knew he was somewhere in the building. My son, a person I had made, and I didn't even know the color of his eyes. 3 days later, I was discharged. But before I could leave, I had to go to the office. My parents were there waiting for me. They looked tired. My father wouldn't meet my eye. Mrs. Evans put a document in front of me. It was heavy, thick paper. The surrender of parental rights. She handed me a pen. "This is the right thing to do, Margaret. He has a wonderful family waiting for him. A lawyer and his wife. They can give him the world. You're doing a brave thing." My hand was shaking so badly I could barely hold the pen. I looked at my dad, hoping he would say, "Stop, let's go home. We'll figure it out." But he just stared at the floor. I felt like I was underwater. I thought about the backyard the social worker promised. I thought about the college fund. I thought about the shame my mother feared. I signed. I signed my name, and with that ink, I legally became a stranger to my own son. As we walked out to the car, the nurse came running up. She was holding a small paper bag. She thrust it into my hands and whispered, "Here, you should have this." We got in the car. We drove out of the city limits. We didn't speak for 3 hours. When I finally opened the bag, inside was the hospital bracelet I told you about, and that one tiny knit bootie. The nurse had stolen them for me. It was the only proof I had that he existed. We got home. My mother told the neighbors I was back from my aunt's house and feeling much better. I went back to high school on Monday, and no one ever spoke of it again. I went on to live a normal life. I went to college. I married a wonderful man, not Tommy. I had 2 daughters. I loved them with a ferocity that scared me sometimes. But every year on November 14th, I would lock myself in the bathroom and cry for 1 hour. I would light a candle. I would wonder if he was happy. I would wonder if he hated me. The baby scoop era ended in the 70s. Laws changed. Society changed. But for millions of us women, the silence remained. Then, 5 years ago, the laws in my state changed again. Sealed adoption records were opened. I put my name in the registry. I didn't expect anything. 3 weeks later, the phone rang. A man's voice. "Hello? Is this Margaret?" I stopped breathing. "Yes?" "My name is David," he said. "I think you're my birth mother." We met for coffee. He walked through the door, and it was like looking at a ghost. He had my chin. He had Tommy's eyes. He told me he had a good life. His adoptive parents were wonderful. He wasn't angry. He just wanted to know where he came from. He wanted to know he wasn't abandoned because he wasn't wanted. I grabbed his hand. He's a grown man, 55 years old. And I told him, I wanted you every single day. I loved you enough to let you go because I thought I was saving you. David and I talk every Sunday now. My daughters know they have a brother. The secret is out of the box. If there is a lesson in my story, it is this. Don't judge the choices people made in the past by the freedom you have today. We did the best we could with the heavy burdens we were given. And if you are out there and you have a secret in your attic, a ghost in your ceiling, let it out. Secrets make us sick. But the truth really does set you free. Thank you for listening to my story. I know many families have a story like this hidden in their family tree. Did you ever discover a secret relative? Or maybe you were adopted? Tell me your story in the comments. I read them, and I promise I understand.